Bill, we'll turn it over to you for an intro. And
okay, and it will be a short one as per Mark, because I could go on and on about Mark. Mark's an amazing conservationist. I've met him many years ago. I went on sabbatical down to South Africa, and he's a good friend of mine. And as he will explain, he is. If you think of the John F. Kennedy Profiles in Courage, there's things that he's done in his career that truly would be in that realm. He studied the ecophysiology of aardwolves, which are the coolest of the hyenas. They eat termites. They're beautiful. They're striped. He's been studying vultures for almost 30 years, including being part of the team that actually figured out why the Asian vulture crisis had occurred. He's an authority on the biology and conservation of blue cranes, the national bird of South Africa, flamingos, which he's going to talk about, and birds of prey, or raptors. Since 2008, he's been the CEO of Birdlife South Africa, which is Birdlife International's affiliate. One of our US affiliates would be National Audubon Society, so he runs a large NGO that does really good conservation work. He loves to travel, especially to remote areas of Africa. And he says he's an amateur wildlife photographer, but since he's been in African Geographic and other different places, he is semi-professional, and you will enjoy his photos in this presentation. And the one good thing about COVID is we have Mark here to give us a talk. So from Johannesburg, here's Mark Anderson.
Okay, well, thanks, Bill. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks, Stephanie and Marty. And the only thing, Bill, is that we're not sitting eating a nice steak and enjoying a good glass of South African red wine, or perhaps a good whiskey as well. But there will be time for that soon. Okay, sorry. You can see my screen, can you? Bill?
Yes.
we do, and we also are seeing both the presenter mode too, it appears.
I'm going to just try and change that. Sorry about that. Okay, I'll show you to see the one now.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. I've got lots of pretty slides to show you, and the talk is about flamingos, and especially one species, the lesser flamingo, you can see in that image. And I've called this talk Kimberley's Pink Gems, and the reason being is that Kimberley, right in the middle of South Africa, is famous for its diamonds, and I believe that Kimberley has other gems, such as its flamingos, as will hopefully become apparent during my presentation. So there's a map of Southern Africa, and you can see borders of South Africa here. And Kimberley is slap bang in the middle of the country. And interestingly, if you cut out the outline of South Africa and balance it on a pinpoint, it balances just west of Kimberley. So right in the middle of the country, we have the city, a fairly small city. You can see the city behind you, but north of it is this wetland, which we call Kamfers Dam. It's actually not a dam, it's not an impoundment. It's an ephemeral pan, which now is more permanently inundated as it receives treated and more recently untreated sewage effluent from the city. Okay, so the talk is about this beautiful bird, the lesser flamingo, and I don't know how many people attending this presentation have seen these birds. You may have seen them at zoos. There are several zoos in the US that actually have lesser flamingos, and it is really an amazing bird, as I will tell you more about in this presentation. So the outline of the talk, firstly, there's a bit about lesser flamingo, biology, conservation, a little bit about what we know about these birds, focusing on Southern Africa. And I'm going to be talking mainly about lesser flamingo conservation, particularly the work that we did at Kamfers Dam, just outside Kimberley, the threats to these birds in a recent rescue operation. Okay, the first bit, Flamingos 101. So some of you may know there's 6 species of flamingos in the world. 4 of them occur in the Americas, and we have 2 species, the greater flamingo and the lesser flamingo, which occur in Africa. And there they are, the greater flamingo, the larger one, paler, a light colored bill with a dark tip, lesser flamingo, pinker, smaller, and with a dark bill. So in the in the distance, the way to identify them and separate them is looking at the bill color. That's the kind of foolproof way to tell the two apart. And there we go. Oh, you can see on the left is a young greater flamingo with a light bill and the dark tip. This is an adult greater flamingo with the dark colored bill. Okay, a little bit more about these flamingos. You can see that map of Africa, and I hope that some of you have been to our beautiful continent, and particularly to our beautiful region in southern Africa. But you can see the shaded area there is the range of the lesser flamingo in Africa. So it occurs mainly in southern Africa and then up into East Africa along the Great Rift Valley, marginally in West Africa, and also in India and Pakistan. So that's the range of the species in Africa, quite a wide distribution. In southern Africa, they're absent from the desert areas of the Kalahari. And I mean, one of the most interesting things about this bird, and it'll become apparent during my presentation, is that in Africa, until recently, they only bred at those three places. So this is a Toshapan in Namibia, Suapan in Botswana, and Lake Natron in Tanzania. Quite incredible, a species with this wide range, only having 3 breeding localities. This is the range in southern Africa, and you can see they occur in the central parts of our country, on the central plateau, in Botswana around the Suapan and the other Makgadikgadi pan, and in Botswana and in Namibia around Etoshapan, and also, of course, along the coast. Now, the movements of these birds are really interesting. They only really fly at night. They fly vast distances at night, and they can fly at speeds of maybe 60, 70, perhaps 80 kilometers an hour. I'm not sure exactly what that is in miles. And they will cover vast different distances. And it's not inconceivable that a bird would leave the Suapan in Botswana in the evening and arrive at Kamfers Dam, 900 kilometers or so away the following morning. And a little bit of work has been done during recent times to actually determine the movements of these birds. And this is some work that was done by Dr. Graham McCullough, an Irishman who lives in Botswana. And you can see that these birds have moved from where he satellite tagged them in Botswana to Kamfers Dam, across to some other wetlands in the central parts of our country, and across to Namibia, the coastline of Namibia. So there are extensive movements in southern Africa. Recently, and I'll speak about this later, some birds were rescued and then rehabilitated and released at Kamfers Dam, which is there. And these were all ringed, and there's been recoveries of these birds at various places around southern Africa. And then most interestingly, this bird that was satellite tagged in South Africa a few years ago flew all the way across the Mozambique Channel, the Indian Ocean, to Madagascar, and then actually flew back sometime later. So it actually flew, as you can see, a distance of 2,351 kilometers in 16 days. The very first evidence of movement of a bird between South Africa and Madagascar. Now, the million-dollar question is whether there's any movement of lesser flamingos between southern Africa and between East Africa. In southern Africa, we have a relatively small population of perhaps 100 to 200,000 lesser flamingos. The bulk of the population is in the Great Rift Valley, and they make use of the lakes in the Great Rift Valley here in East Africa. But there's no evidence for movement of lesser flamingos between these two regions. The only circumstantial evidence that we have are population fluctuations between the regions. At times, we get higher numbers of lesser flamingos in southern Africa than what we think is the permanent population. So there is circumstantial evidence to suggest that at times the birds do move to South Africa or to southern Africa. Very interestingly, the very famous ornithologist, Dr. Leslie Brown, he ringed some lesser flamingo chicks in Kenya, Lake Magadi in Kenya in 1962. Only one of these birds was recovered a distance from Lake Magadi. A few died there, but this single bird was recovered in the Western Sahara. I think it's 35 years later, covering a distance of 6,200 kilometers. So that is the only time that lesser flamingos are ever bred in Kenya at Lake Magadi. And it's at a time when the very famous lake in northern Tanzania, about there, flooded during a very high rainfall event. And as a result of the high rainfall, Lake Magadi in southern Kenya was inundated with water and created favorable conditions for the lesser flamingos to breed. Okay, this just shows the breeding localities for both greater flamingo and lesser flamingo in southern Africa. So let's look at the green circles first. Those are the greater flamingo breeding localities. Large circles mean successful breeding events. And you can see that in South Africa, there's many places where greater flamingos have successfully bred. And there's one place in Botswana and one place in Namibia. The red circles are where the lesser flamingo has bred, with the larger circles indicating where they've bred successfully. So you can see they've only bred successfully in Botswana and Namibia, not previously in South Africa. And there's 3 red circles indicating where they'd attempted to breed in the past. And the breeding events are really spectacular when the birds do breed. You'll have thousands and thousands of chicks. And this is some images, aerial images taken of a breeding event in Etoshapan in Namibia, quite old, 1975. But often these lakes, these pans dry up, and the young birds, which cannot at that stage fly, then walk vast distances, tens and tens of kilometers, to follow the receding water. Many of them die en route, and some of them actually develop these anklets on their legs, and as a result, legs become quite heavy and they die. And predators follow these birds that are trekking, as we call it, following the receding water. Okay, just a little bit about the threats, and there are numerous threats, unfortunately, and I probably won't go into too much detail here, but one of them, and I'm sure this is not unique to South Africa or to Southern Africa, is just general degradation of wetland habitat. And increasingly through climate change and changing rainfall, we're seeing less water flowing into the catchment areas. And this is true certainly for Etoshapan in Namibia and for Suapan in Botswana, less frequently inundated. And they need water in these ephemeral lakes to breed. There's also been mass mortality events in East Africa, quite unexplained until now, but at times thousands of birds die at some of these localities, and a lot of work's been done to try and determine them, and there's a few hypotheses, and I don't think it's been proven conclusively how these birds, why these birds die. Interestingly, in Southern Africa, we've had no mass die-offs, and none have been recorded in Southern Africa, but certainly there have been a number in East Africa over the past few decades. Okay, there's very few natural mortality factors, and this may interest you, that raptors, like the African fish eagle, is certainly a predator of lesser flamingo chicks. And then at Suapan in Botswana, where you get these birds breeding in this massive lake, pan as we call it, lapid-faced vultures go in and depredate on the young lesser flamingo chicks. And you can see there's 2 lapid-faced vultures there, there's another one here, and there's another 3 there. And these birds are flying several tens of kilometers into the central part of the lake to depredate on these young lesser flamingos. So really interesting, but there aren't too many natural mortality factors. Okay, so the population size, something we don't know much about. In Southern Africa, it's 100,000 plus, probably 150,000, we don't really know. Globally, somewhere between 2 and 5 million birds, of course, all in Africa, or mainly in Africa, only marginally in South Asia, India and Pakistan. So it is a bird with a very large population, and in fact, the most numerous of the world's 6 flamingo species. In our regional red data book, here's the latest edition, the 2015 edition, as well as globally, they're classified as near threatened. And the reason for that classification is because they breed at so few localities, and also because there's increasing threats at those few breeding localities that they do frequent. Okay, I'll now tell you about Kamfers Dam, really the focus of this talk. So again, there's the same image I showed in the beginning, right in the middle of the country. There's the city there. Just north of Kimberley is this large lake. It's not an impoundment. It has no dam wall. It's used to be just occasionally inundated with water during high rainfall events, but it now receives stormwater runoff from Kimberley, as well as the water from the sewage works. It's a natural heritage site, which is a recognition given to sites which are important for conservation in South Africa. Also an important bird and biodiversity area, which is a Birdlife International classification. And it was almost a Ramsar site, which is international recognition for wetlands, which are important for not only birds, but also for fish. And there were a couple of reasons why it was not become recognized as a Ramsar site. Okay, this is just a Google Earth image, and you can see there, this is Kimberley, and there's Kamfers Dam, and you can see here are urban development. So it's literally surrounded by urban developments on the south and the west, but not on the north and not on the east. And this is actually a main road. It's the national road, one of the national roads between the central parts of South Africa and Cape Town in the southwest. Okay, we have many lesser flamingos at Kamfers Dam, and this is an image I took a few years ago. And believe it or not, we have up to 80,000 lesser flamingos. So one of the roles I had in my previous job was to count the lesser flamingos on a regular basis. One stage we were counting them monthly. And you can just imagine how difficult it is to count flamingos in those sorts of numbers. It was really, really difficult. It was later that I worked with some geographers from Denmark, Jeff Groom, Ib Peterson, and Anthony Fox, and we used some very high resolution aerial photographs that were taken from an airplane, and we were able to, using an object-based analysis, count every single flamingo on the dam on that particular day. And there were 81,664 lesser flamingos on the dam in May 2006. So not 81,665, that's exactly how many there were. And it wasn't an occasion when there were particularly large numbers. There are times when we have seen more. So we reckon that 100,000 plus at times is not impossible. So we have a good indication of the numbers of birds that occur at times at Kamfers Dam. This is what it looks like, particularly in the mornings when it's still wind still, and the birds will be out feeding, foraging, swimming around, feeding on their preferred diet, which I'll talk to you about now. Interestingly, this is a casino just on the outskirts of Kamfers Dam called the Flamingo Casino, and that's one of the tailings dams, the mine dumps from the underground mining operations. What the birds are feeding on is blue-green algae and diatoms. So, and they're there in large numbers, and particularly this one genus of blue-green algae, Arthrospira, because of the nutrient enrichment, because of this sewage water that's flowing into the dam has enriched the water and has resulted in this absolute proliferation of blue-green algae. And as a result, and some work that's been done by Professor Jan Roos has shown that it probably has one of the highest concentrations of Arthrospira in any wetland anywhere in the world. Okay, so this is some flamingos flying over the dam, and this is just some of the important historical sites in Kimberley. This is the McGregor Museum. This is one of the monuments in Kimberley called the Honoured Dead Memorial. And Kimberley is very well known for its diamonds, one of the most famous places in the world for diamond mining. This is the very, very famous Big Hole. You can actually visit there and visit the historic museum that's been established next to the Big Hole. Now, we have these gems, these diamonds that have been taken out of the ground from the Kimberley area. But in addition to these gems, we also have the other gems, which I believe are the pink gems, and these are the flamingos, Kimberley's flamingos. Okay, so the flamingos are really well known in Kimberley. And if you walk around the streets of Kimberley and ask anybody about Kamfers Dam and flamingos, they will tell you that they're aware of them. And they're in the emblem of the Solplaatje municipality, which is our local municipality in Kimberley. In the emblem of the Francis Bart District Municipality, you can see the two flamingos there. And then we have the Flamingo Casino. And here you can see some bronze statues at the entrance to the Flamingo Casino. There's also a Flamingo School, Flamingo Racecourse, Flamingo Real Estate. So Kimberley and flamingos are, two in one. And people often, think of flamingos when you refer to Kimberley. So a little bit of a summary. Kamfers Dam's flamingos, it's the largest permanent population in Southern Africa. There's no other place in Southern Africa which has as many lesser flamingos on a permanent basis. Certainly the most important feeding locality for lesser flamingos in Southern Africa. And as I mentioned, more than 80,000 birds there at times. And the important feeding locality because of the nutrient enrichment and this incredible concentration of blue-green algae. And then both species of flamingos have attempted to breed at Kamfers Dam in the past. And they've built about 2,500 nests. I'll talk about that just now, but were always unsuccessful in their breeding events. Okay, I'm just going back to the distribution of lesser flamingos in Africa. Same image I showed earlier. You can see our continent, Africa. And again, for those who've never visited, please come and pay us a visit. It's one of the most wonderful places on earth. And I have been to North America several times, as well as to South America and elsewhere. And I'll tell you what, there's no place like Africa. But importantly, this is where the birds have bred successfully until recently. Etoshapan in Namibia, Surpan in Botswana, Lake Natron in Tanzania, and they bred once at Lake Magadi in Kenya. They bred once in Ethiopia and once in West Africa. So this bird has a wide distribution, numbers in the millions, but breeds at very few localities. So how do we assist a species that has so few breeding sites and is threatened and it seems has a declining population? Well, the solution is to establish a new breeding site. And one asks how this can be done. Construct a flamingo breeding island and take them away from the pressures that they would have on the shoreline, as they were having when they attempted to breed at Kamfers Dam. This is not something which is new to flamingo conservation. There's a very famous flamingo breeding site for greater flamingos in the Camargue, on the Rhone Delta in southern France. And Alan Johnson, the famous French ornithologist, established this island many decades ago, and the birds bred successfully for a number of, will still continue to breed successfully annually. It's also been proposed for 2 wetlands in southern Africa, but those islands were never constructed. So we initially had this idea to construct an island in Kamfers Dam way back in 1995. Nothing was ever done about it. It was then pursued again a decade later in 2005 with Ikapa Mining, one of the diamond mining companies in Kimberley, and they were easily convinced this was an important project and an important way to conserve lesser flamingos, and the island was then constructed the following year in September 2006. What I'm going to be doing for most of the rest of the presentation is telling you about this island that we constructed and the breeding of the birds on the island and on the shoreline. So the problem then is, what constitutes ideal lesser flamingo breeding habitat? Certainly not an island on Kamfers Dam, which is only 400 hectares in size, in contrast to the lakes in which they breed, which are tens of thousands of hectares in size, which are ephemeral, only have a few inches of water when it does rain. Kamfers Dam water is quite deep, 1 meter, 2 meters deep, very small. So certainly not the most perfect location for breeding. So, by undertaking this project, we were taking a bit of a chance. So the birds have attempted to breed at 2 localities, here on the western side and here on the southeastern side. And they built their nest turrets. The nest turrets are a bit like sandcastles. They build these sandcastles about 30 centimeters high, and then on which they lay the egg. And there's temperature reasons why they lay the egg above the water. And the problem is there's always been disturbance of these breeding events. There's intruders into this area, poachers, dogs encroach on the breeding area, and I think that's probably resulted in the abandonment of the breeding events. And this side here, because it's adjacent to the national road, the birds have also deserted that site when they have attempted to breed. So we decided to take the breeding island to the northern side of the wetland. And this area is a game farm, or a game reserve as we call it. So, and also an area which is not inaccessible to visitors. And we thought that there would be limited disturbance, and particularly by dogs and people, and would encourage the birds to breed. Now, also the other, I just want to point out here, the Homevale Sewage Works. This is the sewage works located down here, from which Kamfers Dam receives most of its water. And in the Flamingo Casino, I showed that image earlier of the Flamingo Casino. Okay, there is the island once it was constructed, but I'm going to show you a few images of construction. But first, a little bit about the dimensions of the island. It's about 250 meters long, 25 meters wide. And there was a reason for the S shape. And we debated at length what sort of structure, what sort of configuration this island should take, and we decided on an S shape because we have quite a strong prevailing wind that blows from the north, and we thought that with a strong wind you would have quite a lot of both wind and water, and particularly water erosion. So by having an S shape, there would be a smaller area exposed to erosion, and also an S shape gives you 2 sheltered bays onto which through which the young birds, the chicks, could then hop on and off the island should a breeding event ever take place. So there's the 2 bays. We also constructed, we had a high-lying area in the northern side of the island, And we thought if the birds did breed successfully and if the water level of the dam was raised and there were chicks, they could escape to this high-lying area if necessary. And then we also, we built the island from calcrete, which is a very hard material. And because the birds build these nest turrets on which they lay the eggs, we thought that it needed material to construct the nest turrets. They wouldn't be able to use the calcrete. So we topped the island with a layer of clay, and we also constructed 4 very large ponds on the island. And we had water flowing through these ponds 24 hours a day. We had a submerged pump in the water powered by solar panels. So that is the island. We also, shortly after we built the island, installed a webcam on the island, and one could go onto the Africam website and watch the flamingos sort of day and night. Okay, some image of construction. September 2006, we had to build this 200-meter causeway to get out to where the island was going to be constructed. This is a picture I took one evening, and you can see we'd actually put stakes in the ground to guide where the material had to be offloaded. The team worked through day and night, and in fact, some of these vehicles were taken off the mining operation to be used for the construction of the island, and they put lights on the causeway and the island as well to sort of guide the activities as they worked through the night. Some more images of the construction. And yeah, you can see this is actually the clay being offloaded as well, the clay that was used to top the island. This is one of the bays, and you can see, yeah, we're trying to make a gradual slope to allow the birds, if they did breed, to hop on and off the island. On the windward side, because we were concerned about erosion, we also got some alluvial rocks from the Vaal River, nearby river where the alluvial diamond mining takes place, and we packed this on the windward sides, which we thought would help limit erosion. And then this is one of the bays. This is before we topped the island with clay. But one of my responsibilities during this construction was to monitor the effect of the disturbance on the flamingos. And you can see there's a large number of flamingos not too far away from the island, so they weren't too bothered by the activities. Yeah, the island is starting to take shape now. The causeway is still in place. This causeway would ultimately be removed. You can see the S shape quite nicely. And this always reminds me to tell you 2 things. One is that how much the island construction cost. So it cost about R1 million, and you divide it by 16 to get the dollar equivalent. I'm not sure offhand what that is, but R1 million divided by 16 to get the number of dollars. And remember, this is 14 years ago, so it'd be a lot more expensive operation now. So it looks like a bit like a dollar sign. Sorry, that's what it reminds me. If you push the causeway through the S, it looks a bit like a dollar. The other thing it reminds me to tell you is that this island was and still is visible from aircraft. And I was sitting on a flight between Johannesburg and Cape Town a number of years ago, and I'm very impressed with the pilot. He said to everybody sitting on the left-hand side of the plane, if you look out the window, you'll see Kamfers Dam, and you'll see the island was constructed for the flamingos. So I was quite impressed that he had the knowledge. And subsequently, this pilot has actually become a friend. His name's Roger Ford. And but also, we thought that we'd love the island to be visible from space. And in fact, it is visible from on some of the satellite images that we've been using. We also like this S design. It worked really well. And, we thought because, it was a successful project, as you'll hear in a moment, we'd perhaps build another S. And there's also, we have a very nice O design as well, which we thought of using. And we thought it'd be quite nice and quite cool to have an SOS, 3 islands. And this could be a call for assistance to space from lesser flamingos and other flamingos and the biodiversity of the planet that's in so much trouble. Okay, the work started in September 2006, and believe it or not, the whole project took 11 days. This mining company doesn't mess around. It took 4 days to construct the causeway, 3 days to construct the island, 3 days for sort of finishing off the island topping, clay, construction of the ponds. And then we brought in some Boy Scouts and school children, and we constructed some nest turrets. You can see these nest turrets there. We constructed 1,000 nest turrets. We wanted to make this island as attractive as possible for the flamingos. We also then had an official opening on day 11. We invited the Premier of the Northern Cape Province to the event. It was a very cold day, and despite it being spring, and the media were present as well. So shortly afterwards, in fact, the following week, I went to Kenya to assist with some vulture work on the Masai Mara. And I kept in frequent contact with the landowner, Herbert Booth, and he sent me text messages. It's before WhatsApp days, and he said to me that initially no birds, no flamingos on the island, and then I got a text message from him one day and said there were 17 lesser flamingos on the island. He was quite excited about the fact that flamingos are starting to make use of the island. When I returned to South Africa a few weeks later, that's the sight that greeted me. There were, thousands and thousands of flamingos on the island, and you could see it even on the adjacent areas of the island. And this is because the island was literally jam-packed with lesser flamingos. They then left the island, and we wondered why. We took a boat and we boated across to the island. We found that they'd actually constructed about 100 of their own nests. This is not one of the nests that we constructed, and they'd laid a few eggs. So we were quite excited that they'd accepted this island and at least attempted to breed. The problem is that a few months later, they deserted the island completely. For 4 months, not a single lesser flamingo on the island. You can see now the 4 large ponds that we constructed. You can see the nest turrets here that we constructed, and you can then see the nest turrets that the flamingos constructed in the ponds. So we were all quite despondent that this project seemed to have failed, and we were unsure why. But then, much to our surprise, in September 2007, the lesser flamingos returned en masse, and thousands of flamingos on the island. Then in October, November 2007, we started seeing some very interesting behavior that we'd never previously recorded at Kamfers Dam. Sorry, it's having a sip of juice. We saw that the birds had become very pink, so their plumage coloration had changed, and they were doing some really interesting displays on the island. They were doing this head flagging display. So we suspected, maybe, hopefully, they would breed. We then went away, as we do in the summer months in South Africa, returned to Kimberley on the 2nd of January, and my wife Tanya and I went out to Kamfers Dam. I looked through the spotting scope, and we were absolutely amazed by what we'd seen. There were about 6 lesser flamingo chicks that we saw through the scopes. And this was a historic event, now that I think about it. In fact, I did a television interview this morning about this project, and I spoke about this historic event, because literally we were the first 2 people ever in the history of South Africa to lay their eyes on lesser flamingo chicks, because they'd never bred in South Africa ever before. So Tanya and I waited until dark, trying to count the chicks. We never got more than 6, as far as I can remember. I actually stood back and phoned, I think, 28 people and told them the good news. And, we were absolutely overjoyed. We'd actually just returned from holiday, as I said. Nobody had looked at the island for about 2-3 weeks. And our children, who were still fairly young at that stage, were at home. There was no dinner. We actually stopped on the way home and bought a cake and a bottle of champagne, and kind of celebrated eating cake and drinking champagne for dinner. And our 13-year-old daughter had champagne for the first time in her life. By late January, there were more chicks. You can see them there as well. They're really cute little birds. And believe it or not, by March the following year, there were 9,000 chicks. And this is an aerial photograph of the dam, and you can see these gray birds are the lesser flamingo chicks. Now, how we know that there were 9,000 chicks is that the middle of every month, for a long time, we flew over the island with a helicopter. And Peter Honey, who Professor Bauman knows very well, he owns a helicopter, he's a very good helicopter pilot. And his company actually constructed the island. And we'd fly over, hover above the island at about 1,000 foot. And then we'd fly over at about 600 foot. And I would then sort of hang out the helicopter. We'd take one of the doors off, and I'd take a series of very high resolution images. And we would use these images to count the flamingos. We'd blow them up in Photoshop and put a dot on them as we counted them. So we had really accurate counts of the lesser flamingos. And we divided them up into sections. And yeah, you can see as we've counted, these are probably chicks, put a red dot on them, then we go and count the next section. So quite a useful way of counting them. I suppose there's more modern methods of doing it, but at that stage, this is the way we analyze those images. And then the birds, the young birds eventually fledged, and these are juvenile lesser flamingos, and they started to take to flight. So what had happened is that we'd established the 4th breeding locality for lesser flamingos in Africa, the 5th or 6th locality in the world, because they sometimes breed in India, but importantly, the very first breeding locality for the species in South Africa. They then bred the following year, and this time there were 13,000 chicks. And you can just look at this island. is jam-packed with flamingos. You can see this interesting plumage that the birds have when they do breed. So if you look at Etoshapan in Namibia, they only breed successfully on average every 9 years. The fact that they bred during 2 consecutive years was quite interesting and quite useful for the conservation of the species. Okay, they then bred in the following year, produced only 800 chicks. The year after that, less than about 100 chicks, and then they did not breed. So in those 4 years of breeding, they produced 24,000 chicks. The population was estimated at that stage in Southern Africa to number less than 100,000 birds. So this wasn't a small contribution to the regional population. The project had lots and lots of publicity, newspapers, magazines. The webcam was very, very popular, and we could actually operate this webcam remotely and zoom in on a nest, such as on the bottom right here as well, with a chick on the nest turret, and then have wide-angle shots as well. Also received a number of awards, which we're very grateful for, particularly for the mining company, which is a very green mining company, to receive recognition for its important work. But there have been problems at the dam, unfortunately, and I'll just briefly talk about those as I come to the conclusion of the talk. So firstly, the sewage works, which supplies the water from Kimberley, has been dysfunctional for a long time. And lately, for the last few years, raw sewage is being flowing into the dam, unfortunately. The water quality is very poor. At times we've had too much water, the island flooded. I'll show some images of that in a moment. Also, we think some pollutants entering up the dam, coliform bacteria. We found avian pox virus in the flamingos, and also a big housing development was proposed for an area adjacent to the dam. And we have collisions with some of the overhead cables. So we formed something called Save the Flamingo Association to address these threats, and a number of organizations have been involved in this association over time to try and address these threats. But this is the western side of Kamfers Dam, and Kamfers Dam is actually here on the left of the image. And this is a railway line, one of the most important railway lines in South Africa. It transports manganese from the main manganese mining area in the country down to the coast, to one of our ports. And believe it or not, this is the sewage works. This is just raw sewage that's flown into the veld. So we've got raw sewage just flowing openly into this area and inundating it as well. So this was a big concern for us. We then also picked up this avian pox virus in some of the flamingos. We did some work on this. We were concerned about whether the water was causing these lesions that we were seeing on the birds. Turns out that this virus is actually spread by biting insects, but we thought that maybe the number of these biting insects had actually proliferated in this poor quality water. The other problem we had is the water level started rising and the island flooded. And you can see, this is images from the webcam. You can see as the island is flooding, the webcams, the nest turrets are still above water, but slowly they started flooding, and you could see this. We actually photographed, filmed this lesser flamingo chick as it drowned. And there you can see the island now mainly inundated. That high-lying area that we constructed was useful at that stage because some of the chicks could escape to that area before they could swim, before they could fledge. Then we had this housing development proposed for the area adjacent to Kamfers Dam. This is the red area. 20,000 people were going to live in this residential area, a distance of about 250 meters or so from Kamfers Dam. You have the island, now an internationally important site. We didn't think this was a great idea, so we got involved in opposing this development. And I was an official of the government at that stage, and I'd expressed an opinion. And my opinion wasn't well received. And you can see this. I was a cartoon in one of our national newspapers as a result. So that's a whole story in itself. But at that stage was on my way to Birdlife South Africa, where I've been working for the last 12 years. So perhaps not a bad thing after all. Okay, then just moving on to the last few slides, is that after the 4 years when the birds bred, for a number of years, you can see 2012 to 2016, the dam dried up. You can see the island over here and the causeway that had been removed. The bottom of the causeway was still there. The dam had now dried, the flamingos moved away, and the water had actually been pumped elsewhere. And this received quite a lot of publicity in the local papers. Seoul is the municipality, so Seoul Plaiki municipality slammed for the flamingo crisis. And of course, the residents of Kimberley were up in arms. In fact, where the water was going, or a large amount of the water, was flowing into the veld, as we call it, and in fact into several pristine pans, lakes, on an adjacent property, a nearby property to the west of Kimberley. And these were absolutely beautiful, pristine wetlands until they started receiving this raw sewage water. And that actually persists till today. And this has probably almost entirely destroyed the ecology of these wetlands. But then, to our surprise, in summer of 2017, 2018, Tanya and Peter Honey, the helicopter pilot, flew over the dam, as they did fairly regularly, have done fairly regularly during the early summer months, midsummer months, to determine what the flamingos are up to. It's quite difficult to know exactly what they're up to from the ground. And they found that the birds had actually bred, but not on the island this time, on the southwestern side of the dam, which was incredible. And you can see the breeding area here. They didn't approach any closer than this because we don't want to disturb the birds when they're breeding. They're quite sensitive to disturbance. During that year, 8,000 chicks were produced. They bred again the following summer. 10,000 adults were recorded to be in nests, 30,000 chicks and creches. This was on the 14th of January. But the problem then is that the dam water levels started receding. It was a very dry period, very hot, a lot of evaporation, and a rescue event was undertaken, and about 2,000, just over 2,000 lesser flamingo chicks were rescued and taken into rehabilitation centers around the country. And some of these birds have subsequently been released back at Kamfers Dam. The success wasn't that good. I think less than a third of the birds actually survived. Something I think that was probably decided too hastily. There were another 5,200 or so lesser flamingos that remained on, chicks that remained on the dam. These weren't rescued. We then spent a few months as Birdlife South Africa, including my wife Tanya, monitoring this population of birds, and literally every single individual successfully fledged. There was very, very low mortalities of those 5,200 odd lesser flamingos that remained on the dam. Okay, we do a lot of work at Kamfers Dam. We do some really exciting remote monitoring. This is Kamfers Dam here. These are some images we do. One of our bright young scientists does some remote modeling of the algal concentrations in the wetlands, so we can determine as the algal concentrations start dropping whether the birds will perhaps move off somewhere else. This is algal concentration over time here. And this also would help us anticipate whether a rescue operation is needed, whether the birds are, if they are, the birds are breeding, and the algal concentration starts declining. We also do remote counting of flamingos. We've been using drones and airplanes to take high resolution photos, excuse me, and count the flamingos. We hope to further develop this technology and then make use of it for the Great Rift Valley lakes, and finally get a better estimate of the number of lesser flamingos in Africa and globally. So yeah, it's been an interesting time, you know, all for this magnificent bird. And Bill said, you know, do take some photographs. This was a really pleasant day when I was sitting on my small blind that I have. It's a bow hunting blind that I use for photography. Put it up next to the dam and was hoping for some flamingos to approach closely. And this very obliging adult lesser flamingo came very closely. And these series of images have been used quite a lot over the years. So there's the summary of the breeding events. The initial 9,000 chicks, 13,000, 1,800, and then of course fewer, and then the dam flooded, no breeding for a few years, and then we've had some subsequent breeding events. And just this summer, beginning of the year, we had about 2,000 chicks that were produced and successfully fledged. We have challenges going forward. Sewage water issues remain a problem with water quality. And in fact, our policy and advocacy manager, Birdlife South Africa's policy and advocacy manager, is in Kimberley at the moment. She's an environmental lawyer, and she's investigating some of the issues, and we hope to put some more pressure on government to actually, you know, fix the sewage works to make sure that it's functional, so we can have water of a suitable quality flowing into the dam. The wetland remains unprotected. It's in private ownership. Unfortunately, the landowner is very sort of conservation conscious and conservation minded, but this does not, you know, secure the wetland forever. There are some disturbance issues which persist, particularly by dogs that worry us. We would like to construct a fence on the southwestern side of the dam to prevent intrusions of poachers and dogs. We still have collisions of birds with overhead cables. We're concerned about future housing developments. Other housing developments have been proposed. But also we'd like to work on ecotourism opportunities. This is a very, very famous site now, and there's no facilities for visitors and for ecotourists, and it could contribute, if the facilities were developed, to the economy of Kimberley and the Northern Cape. So that's really the end of my talk. And just to say that, I work for Birdlife South Africa. We're a conservation NGO. Audubon is our partner in the US. We have 115 odd partners around the world. We don't only focus on flamingo conservation, we also do work on a whole host of other species. If you are interested in finding out more about us, please visit our website, birdlife.org.za, or drop me a mail, ceo@birdlife.org.za, if you'd like to find out some more. And there's many, many people that have been involved in this project, and that's just some of them. This is the island construction side of things. So thanks to them for their contributions. And thank you, Stephanie and Marty and Bill. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was really fascinating. It's really amazing to hear about all of the different kind of aspects. And definitely, I know our department's very interested in these interdisciplinary problems and how to solve them. So that was really quite fascinating. If we have just a couple minutes left, if you had time for just a couple questions from our group.
I need to, sorry, Stephanie, I need to also acknowledge Professor Bauman as well.
Oh,
because he was there through the drama. He wasn't involved directly in the Flamingo Island construction, but he has had a student that's worked at Kamfers Dam, and she graduated with a PhD. But also he was there through the drama. He was there when we constructed the island. He was there when I ran into problem with government, and he so he's been through it. And I think through my regular communications with Bill, Professor Bauman, he's been an integral part of this. And I think when he visits Kimberley, we always go out to Kamfers Dam, usually with a sundowner, as Africans like to drink a sundowner at sunset, and then we discuss the conservation work. Okay,
and when we can travel, we'll do a field trip if anybody wants to come.
Oh,
Yes.
Well, I think you sold me earlier telling me I could safari on horse, so I'll have to go for sure. So we did have some questions from our audience. They put them in chat, and so I was just gonna relay those. So Dr. Tilley is an ecological engineer in our department, and he was curious about the infrastructure surrounding the municipal wastewater and what's being done in terms of trying to clean that up. Are they considering things like constructed wetlands or green infrastructure? Particularly, I guess, you mentioned ecotourism at the end. Is that under consideration for those reasons?
So it's a really good question. And the sewage works is actually state of the art. It's one of the better sewage works in our country, but it's not functioning properly. And this is because of capacity issues in this municipality. And that's the irony. And, and a lot of work has been done to advise the municipality on what needs to ensure that it functions properly. They did do a major sort of improvement and expansion of the sewage works a number of years ago, but it's just not functioning. And the problem is that in addition to that, the pipelines that pump the sewage water from the city to the sewage works are leaking, and there's various pump stations that actually pump it up to the sewage works, and those are not functioning as well. So the water that's leaking into the surrounding wetlands is actually leaking, in fact, from one of these malfunctioning pump stations. So there's lots of problems, unfortunately.
Yeah. It sounds like something that's going to take some
time.
We're
putting a lot of pressure on government, and we hope to resolve them.
Yeah.
So then there's Marty then asked a question about the natural lakes in the area. Where do the birds go when they leave this wetland? They are the main ones they use if inundated, so the one in Namibia and the one in Botswana, but those are not permanent. There are some other more perennial wetlands in the central parts of South Africa, and obviously the birds also make use of the coastline. So they just disperse quite widely, and I think the recovery of banded birds and the movements of the satellite birds has told us that they move around quite extensively. But in South Africa, they're mainly making use of these artificial wetlands today. And there's a question later on, Stephanie, about the flamingos use the Witwatersrand gold uranium tailing ponds. No, not as far as I know. Maybe occasionally. And in fact, it's an interesting question because just in the last few days, we've got queries about in Namibia, they're using some uranium tailing ponds in Namibia. There's a few greater flamingos, the other species, on the tailing ponds. And these are massive, massive ponds. And they were asking how we could discourage them from using these ponds, because some of the birds had actually already died. And I presume this could be from some of the contaminants in the water. And it's quite difficult because of the size. There's no ways you can cover them. And the only advice we could give is perhaps use drones to chase the birds away. But this is something which is still being attended to. And the mining company is very keen to find a solution to the problem.
Right. And then we had one last question from Dr. Rupert, I think, and he said he wanted to know why the island had been not used by flamingos for those recent years. So I think his Zoom dropped out, so he didn't hear that part of the talk. So.
And that's because the island flooded and the layer of clay washed away. The island was largely eroded away, and there just hasn't been the enthusiasm, particularly because the municipality hasn't addressed the water issues. And there hasn't been the enthusiasm to reconstruct the island, unfortunately. But there are some plans, and we, as Birdlife South Africa, are certainly going to pick up on this. We've got some really nice support internationally for the work. The Gaia Zoo in the Netherlands is now supporting some of the work that we're doing, and we will certainly put in some effort to address these problems. The site is just too important now. We need to put in all our efforts to protect it. So, and there was a question earlier as well from Edward about contaminants issues in the water. So there's none of the mining tailing ends up in this water. And I don't know, Bill, Lindsay's work, I don't know if she picked up any of this. I mean, this is more a question that you better prepared to answer, I suppose.
I can send Ed Lindsay's dissertation.
Oh, there you go.
Or one of the papers, yeah.
Okay.
Well, very good. Well, I think that addresses our questions. Thank you again. This was really, like I said, fascinating. It was really fun to hear about the flamingos, and yes, they're amazing. They're quite interesting. I have seen them in zoos, but I look forward to seeing them in the wild someday. So. Thanks.
And Stephanie, please give the attendees my email address if they'd like to receive some papers about the project and learn more. Please.
I will do that. I'll post it with your talk so that they can follow up with you. That's wonderful.
Good.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Goodbye, everyone. Cheerio.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Mark. It's fantastic.
Thank you.